From Shine Cancer Support, this is
Not Your Grandma's Cancer Show.
Hi, I'm Tatum, and today we're exploring what it's like to lose a partner to cancer. For many of us in our 20s, 30s or 40s, it's not something that we've imagined, as we thought we had decades more time. So I've got three great guests joining me today. I've got Jakub, who lost his partner Anne-Marie a few months ago. Andrew knew Kelly had incurable cancer, but her death still came as such a shock. And Pete channeled his grief of losing Maya into supporting other families, starting an organisation called Mummy's Star.
This is not your grandma's cancer show. Not Your Grandma's Cancer Show.
Hi Jakub, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So can I ask, what was your life like before Anne-Marie was diagnosed? What was going on?
So Anne-Marie was diagnosed back in 2021. And if you think back to that time, we had just come out of COVID a few months earlier, and everybody was getting back to their regular lives. And a big part of that was changing around our own family situation, our own family dynamic. Anne-Marie had taken time off work when our second daughter was born, and that was back in 2016. And she'd been working. Well, she'd been at home with the kids since that time. Before COVID had come along, she was looking at getting back to work. She just started working with a charity, and then once COVID hit, we were all at home, we were all locked in a bubble. And once that had all kind of eased off and wrapped up, she was looking forward to getting back out into the real world and, reconnecting with some of the people that she was working with, and getting outside of the house. And unfortunately, she was diagnosed with a sarcoma of the pulmonary artery. It was originally misdiagnosed. It is, it's an incurable disease, but we knew that we had to go straight into therapy. So the first thing was there was a debulking operation at a hospital in Cambridge, open heart surgery. And then after that, it was straight into chemotherapy. And we rode that cancer train for about 3 years after that. So it really was a massive rug pull at a time when things were looking up, and that's just the way life works out sometimes.
And what brought you along to Shine's Plus One program? So that's the program that Shine runs for partners of people with an incurable cancer.
My wife Anne-Marie had done the standard program of people going through incurable cancer, the support groups that you offer, and she suggested that I actually join this group. I didn't really know what to expect, and I had no expectations of these groups, and I just thought, okay, why not? Let's see where this leads. And within a couple of sessions, I was like, okay, yeah, it's actually not too bad to be involved with a bunch of people going through the same thing and talking about their experiences and how they related to aspects of this entire experience.
You lost Anne-Marie shortly after the program. Did you find some support from other people in the Plus Ones group?
I did. It felt kind of awkward, to be perfectly honest. I was the first one out of that group to have, lost their spouse, and I very much felt like I didn't really belong in that space anymore, or I was being the downer in that group, because these are people who are still going through the experience, still very much have hopes that they'll keep going for months, years, whatever it is. It's a journey. There's no set timetable to this, and I kind of very much felt like I stood out in that, and I didn't know whether I still had a place in that. But I was supported by the other people in the group. They still wanted to hear what was going on in my life. I was still very much wanted to hear what was going on in theirs, and I felt like I had a different experience now to share with them, and one doesn't invalidate the other.
I heard you sharing some things and everyone sort of noting them down in terms of, I know you had said that you had powered through passwords in a day. Some of those practical, very deeply practical considerations.
My wife and I were both very practical people, and there were some things that we had prepared ahead of time simply because I suppose we had the luxury of knowing that Anne-Marie's, life was going to come to an end. For people who lose their spouses due to accidents or something unforeseen, they don't have the time to prepare. So we made sure that we had our wills sorted, that we had discussed key things about how we wanted the kids brought up. I had made spreadsheets up of like where all of the accounts were and, which institutions they were with and, account numbers and all of that kind of stuff. But, kind of towards the end, it was really not until the end that I asked Anne-Marie for her Gmail password. Once you've got access to the email, then you can reset all of the other passwords and also the code for her mobile phone, because you need confirmations as well, because people will send these various institutions will send you like confirmation texts. Are you sure you want to make this payment? Are you sure you want to do this and whatever? So those were things that were absolutely critical. And once Anne-Marie had passed away, I did very much go into a busy period, and a lot of people will tell you the same thing, that there are the practicalities to do with having a funeral. My wife was Irish, so her family had all of that organized from the island side of things. There was a repatriation of her remains, all of that kind of thing. But I still had 3 kids that I needed to organize to get out there, etc. And, once we came back, there was the organization of a memorial here in Bristol where I live for all of our friends, and really getting down to those kind of boring administrative tasks. And I had a massive to-do list. At one point in time, there were like 27 items on that list. Everything from call the government's tell us once number, or website, which closes off all of the various government department things, through to contacting banks, contacting insurance companies, contacting whatever, changing things like the membership for Lidl and Marks and Spencers and all of those types of things, resetting various accounts. And at one point I sat down specifically, I know the thing that you're talking about, I sat down and just one day just started resetting passwords and resetting things for regular delivery of milk, sorted out like 14 of these things in one foul swoop. And that was, a massive mental load off, just to kind of go, okay, well, those things are put away now and I can focus on other things.
And in thinking about that, so there was space and focus for those really practical, logistical considerations. Where did you start to get a bit of emotional space to process what you were feeling and what you might need?
That's a tricky one to kind of to think back on. It's been just over 5 months now, since I lost Anne-Marie. And I was dealing with things pretty much as soon as I had the time in order to do it. And some of it was, during that period of administration, that busy time that I call it. There was very much a lot of thinking, during that stage, but it wasn't really until later, past that initial franticness, and that initial franticness was quite long. I think it was about 6 weeks, because we had the funeral, then as I said, there was this period of getting some of the administrivia done. Then there was memorial to work out, and then the end of the school year. And the end of the school year usually means, well, you've got a whole bunch of kids' activities that need to be done. And I'd actually planned a trip away to Poland, where I'm from, and we were going to do a road trip. So there was the preparation for that, etc. And it wasn't really until we'd arrived on holiday that I got a chance to actually clear my head and start thinking deeply about where I was, where I was going to go, what my priorities were, that kind of thing. So it wasn't really that there was like a firm moment, but it was very much a sort of a transition over time, where your focus just naturally shifts into that space.
Yeah, and I can really hear that that pace of the busyness and kind of getting into that distraction. And actually, to some degree, you can't process everything all at once. It's too big. I can hear a bit of sort of putting one foot in front of another, getting things done, like this momentum forward. But actually, at the same time, were there ways that grief showed up that you weren't expecting?
We knew that Anne-Marie was going to pass away, and even during the Shine support group, we discussed this Kubler-Ross model of grief, the 5 stages of grief, which is it's a pretty well known model that you sort of you go through anger, there's like denial, whatever, and you iterate through those things. And I found I wasn't doing that, and it kind of surprised me. We'd been going through this cancer journey for 3 years, and it was a really, really intense period. And any relationship takes knocks from a stressful period, but when it's so heavy and so sustained, cracks can't not show in that. So I spent a lot of time thinking very deeply about my relationship with Anne-Marie, how things had played out, what it all meant, that kind of thing. And it didn't really seem to match that Kubler-Ross experience. And there's 2 things that really helped me out here to understand this over time. And there's this. I'd been working with a therapist for 3 years. This is since Anne-Marie got diagnosed, and she stuck this thing under my nose, which was the continuing bonds theory of grief, which is that your relationship with the person doesn't end when they pass away. That it continues, and it's not static in that it is the same as at the moment that they died, but also it evolves with you. So the manifestation of that is that people will talk to their partner, in the kitchen, or ask them questions, talk to a photo, or even have an argument, like a shower thoughts of like, oh, well, you're criticizing me. Why? If you were in the same situation, you'd be doing the same thing, that kind of stuff. And this theory says that this is completely normal. And because I've heard this a number of times from people saying, it's weird, like I kind of feel like they're there and I'm having these conversations with them, and am I going crazy? And it's like, no, actually a lot of people go through this. This is a really interesting model because what it says is, by the name, that there's no real end point for grief. There's no real closure. It's just a continuing relationship with a person, but they just don't, happen not to be there. The other thing that helped me was actually recently I found a podcast by Andrew Huberman, who's a neuroscientist, and he's got podcasts about a whole bunch of different stuff. And he did a great one about grief, and it's quite a long one. It's about 2 hours long. But what he says is that from a neural basis, what happens during the grief process is that you're trying to remap this really close association of a relationship as it forms between like different parts of the brain have kind of these dimensions, right? And it says that there's a relationship is mapped across closeness, like your specific relationship with that person, time, like where you expect them, when do you expect to see them next, and also space, like where do you expect to see them. And he says that that's a really difficult process because you walk into the house and you expect that person to be sitting in a particular place, or you expect them to be somewhere at like 5 o'clock or whatever, and they're not there. And this is why it's really, really difficult. But what he said was, this thing really resonated for me in one sentence. Like a whole bunch of stuff like clicked into place about how I'd been relating to Anne-Marie and my grief process. Was that a lot of people, the way that they manage the pain through the grief process across that closeness, time and space, is that they attack the closeness part and they try to take apart the relationship itself so that they don't feel the pain of the time and space element. And he said that the key part to processing grief well is to hang on to that closeness and that relationship that you had with that person, but to very much focus and spend some time, thinking deeply about the fact that this person is no longer here. They will not be here tomorrow. You will not see them at dinner time. That kind of thing. Processing grief through this model of a pendulum that you swing into feeling really intense emotions. And you can do that for some time, but it's okay to swing out of it and go away and go and do other things, laugh at a dumb sitcom, go hang out with friends and whatever. And one is really necessary for the processing of the emotion, and you can do that, but it is very, very intense. It's painful. There's no two ways about it. But then the recuperation phase is actually swinging out and saying, okay, I'm not going to think about that now. I'm going to go off and think about something different. I'm going to go off and play with my kids, do whatever, and then swing back into that processing phase when I'm ready.
I love those.
There was a lot of processing done over the last few months.
Oh, I can hear that. And what I love about those is that I can feel the bits in there that are familiar to grief that I've experienced, in terms of me and my mum still have arguments. And it's been 12 years. I can really hear that continuing, those continuing bonds and those neural pathways. And also why then we can get angry with someone after they've gone, because we're trying to detach, from that, instead of thinking about kind of like you said, the time and space. And also, I think a lot of what can happen is that guilt for sometimes feeling too much, and guilt also from like, actually today I'm fine. Why am I fine? That understanding that it's not all going to be there all at the same time, I think gives a real sense of like, you're allowed breathing room. You're allowed. This is a key thing. This is a key thing that, that pendulum model does, is that it gives you permission. Yeah. That you can, it's perfectly okay to just say, look, I'm not going to process this now. I've been here for too long. I'm going to go away and recover from this. Oh, thank you, Jacob. I'm going to bring Andrew in here. Andrew, how has that been, listening to Jacob?
It's been quite interesting, really, in terms of the practicality side of things. Whilst we knew in January 22, when Kelly was diagnosed, it was already stage 4 when it was found, and basically into palliative care more or less straight away, or just to manage the tumour itself, potentially with the hopes that it might shrink and they could operate, but that never became a reality, unfortunately. But whilst we had almost 2 years to prepare, I think partly down to my not wishing to sort of accept the situation, we didn't really discuss any practicalities. And then when the time came, as you know, very suddenly, November last year, we were given less than 24 hours notice before she passed away. up until that point, she'd been quite well. We attended the Shine conference a few weeks before, and she looked the healthiest she'd ever done, really, in a strange sort of way. So we didn't do any of the practical things. We didn't sort bank accounts out. We didn't sort anything like that. So the time when we should have been really close, those few hours that we had together at the end, we spent frantically trying to do that thing, do all the practical things right at the last minute, literally up until a couple of hours before she passed away. So in terms of that, I think what Jakub and his wife did was, I don't think I was prepared to accept that we needed to do those things, but actually looking back, then it would have been a much better thing to have done, personally. But you don't know what's best at the time, do you?
But also really understandable, because I think Jakub used that kind of expression of being sort of in that turbulence of cancer treatment, and, things have been bad, but then they've been good. And in the midst of all of that, you can find your own stability, and it can be really tough to have those conversations at that time.
Exactly, and with two we have children quite young. Well, my eldest son's 18 this year. My youngest is 12. We had family life to get on with, trying to protect them. So I sort of took the view, rightly or wrongly, just to crack on with work, keep family life sort of as normal as we could, really. So we didn't really have a lot of time for, Kelly referred to it as health admin, basically all the cancer treatments that she had, hospital appointments. I mean, it got to the point where we were in hospital 3, 4, 5 days a week out of 7. And that went on for, best part of 18 months. So we didn't really have a lot of time. I became a full-time carer effectively towards the end. Throughout, really, because she had various sort of things that needed to be done. So at the end of each day, we were just exhausted, quite frankly. So I come home from work. I mean, Kelly still carried on with the sort of the cooking and all that type of thing. But then we had to sort all the dressings out and medication and things like that. So by, 8, 9 o'clock at night, we were done. No time for...
Well, I think that is something that we definitely hear about a lot, is that actually having the space to even think about what you might need and have those kinds of conversations when you're doing the job that normally both of you would have done, but now you're taking on a lot of that. And on top of that, having more responsibilities in terms of dressings and hospital admin and bureaucracy of that. Like, it's incredibly draining. Yeah.
And I thought it's a strange sort of thought process, but I thought of it as a privilege. Kelly looked after me through an illness years ago, brought up the boys and all that sort of thing. So it was sort of, in a strange way, a way to sort of, I don't know how to explain it. My sort of way to pay her back, I guess, in a strange sort of way. But it's, it was my privilege to look after her. But I literally had nothing in the tank for anything else.
Yeah.
Just about get through a day of work. And I mean, my employer being absolutely fantastic. And, a boss that, best boss anybody could wish for in terms of supporting me, providing me with IT equipment so I could work in the hospital and things like that. So I could basically crack on as normal for the best part of things. But yeah, home life was far from normal.
And after losing Kelly, of course, you've got your feelings and how you're processing, but you also had your sons going through their own grieving process.
Yeah.
How much did you feel like you could relate to them during that time?
Oh, that's a really tricky one, Tatum. I felt very hopeless and still do in that respect, because I've still got my mum. I'm very lucky at my age, my mum's still alive. And I still can't to this day put myself in their position of losing their mum. Well, Evan was, it was a week before his 17th birthday, and I was 11 at the time. So, it's a really difficult thing to try and imagine. It's a very different relationship, I guess, that you have with your mum. They've known Kelly all her life. She's been sort of a constant for them, Everybody will say it, but, the best mum that she could ever be, the best role model that I could ever ask for, really, for my two boys.
And the youngest one really had a fear of losing her, didn't he?
Bizarrely, he always had, from being tiny. I don't know whether it's a premonition or what, I don't know. I don't know whether to believe in that sort of stuff or not, but he always had sort of separation anxiety, was always terrified. I think terrified is probably the right word, that Kelly was going to die. Where it came from, we have no idea. But, yeah, and that's been difficult. But interestingly, I thought he would be, well, he's distraught. I don't mean to downplay that, but out of the three of us, he's sort of, I don't know, strongest. That's not the right word or not, but after about a week after Kelly had died, he sort of said to me one day, he said, "I want to go back to school, Dad." I said, "Oh, are you sure?" Well, he was on the run up to Christmas, so I think they only had about a week left before they broke up for Christmas, and he just said, "Yeah, I want to be with people that aren't sad all the time." And he's got a really tight group. There's four lads that are really, a really tight group of lads, really good friendships, and he just wanted to be with them and a little bit of normality, I guess.
Yeah, and actually thinking about that pendulum, you can see kind of, yes, like having that space to not process was really important for him, and it might, can swing back the other way as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think for Evan as well, he's got a part-time job, and the lady who's his manager had lost her mum at a similar age. So again, he found a lot of comfort in that.
And you also went to the Plus Ones group, didn't you?
I did, yeah. So Kelly joined Shine, I don't know when it was, a while before she died, probably about a year before. And I saw how much she got out of it. And she asked whether, what I thought about it. Well, I'm a bit of I don't know, I think at the time I'm quite not very expressive, but I think having been part of the Shine groups allowed me to sort of express how I'm feeling, that sort of thing. So I think from that point of view, I was glad that I joined. It was nice to hear other people's stories. I don't mean it's nice to know that other people are going through the same thing. At sort of a young age, you don't really talk about it. You don't know many people whose partners are going through cancer or anything like that. So it was a what's the phrase? A safe space. Yeah. I suppose, in terms of being able to share things that I didn't really want to discuss with Kelly about how I was feeling. So yeah, a really useful place. I'm still finding, obviously, I'm still part of the WhatsApp group from my Plus Ones circles group. You sort of know what to say to each other, I guess.
Yeah.
We know what not to say.
That could be just as important, can't it?
Yeah.
And I know you've had some late night texts. I think that's also, so valuable, especially like nighttime can often be when, your mind has a little bit more space, and it can almost seem overwhelming, and having someone to text and...
Yeah, definitely.
Who's going through that can make such a difference.
Yeah, so
I'd love to bring Pete in here. How has it been hearing from Jakub and Andrew?
There's an awful lot within that resonates back, and I think that I was smiling when Jakub was talking about those kind of conversations that you have, and I've always called them like kitchen sink chats. Is like staring at you, see your reflection in the window, and you're cleaning up after the kids have gone to bed at night, and then all of a sudden you're having the conversation and go, well, that's the way I'm going to do it. Yeah, but I do it this way. Yeah, but you're not here, so I've got to do it this way. And we're going to ultimately have to decide which way we're going to agree on this. And it just, you think you're going absolutely stark raving mad, seeing your reflection in the kitchen window while you're doing it. But ultimately I think it's like a comfort and balance to think, right, well, if we're going to have to step forward and one of us is here and the other isn't, then we're trying to piece our way through life by trying to remember what their preferences were and carry that into your decision making, but being honest and reflective and not seeing yourself as selfish and thinking, do you know what, at the end of the day, it's me that's doing the doing, not through choice, but through the tragedy of what's happened. And that's, how you step forward. But yeah, the first few times you have those conversations, you do feel like you've just lost the plot. But then I think there's a comfort that comes with it as well. Listen, Andrew, I think it's really interesting, I think, about kids, and it's nearly 12 years now since I lost Maya, and I think the one thing I've sort of seen and learned from my own experiences and from a lot of other people that I've met over the years, going through grief, is I think we take our grief and we apply it onto how other people may respond, and say other people mainly in children. And actually, I think sometimes they're a lot more adept to coping with this than we are, because I think they see things in colour when we think we still see the situation very much in black and white, and the starkness of yesterday felt true and full and today feels empty. And I think, and not to suggest for one second that children don't grieve, but I think they grieve in a very different way to us at times. They have their memories and their losses, but I think they have a more flexible way of growing with it. And I think that case in point, a friend of mine lost his wife last year, and almost I remember having an identical conversation with him where he was pleasantly surprised that his daughter wants to go back to school so quickly. And it was, well, but that's my normal, Dad. That's where my friends are. That's what day to day looks like to me. Why should it stop? And in the cold light of day, you can think, yeah, but you've just lost your mum. How can you be thinking like that? But when you strip it back, you think, but that is normality to them. Why should that upend just because we presume it would? And I think it's good to be led by them in that respect. And some kids will be ready, some kids won't be. But yeah, there's an awful lot that just it just really chimes. Listen to you both, and and everything you're experiencing at the moment. It's all different but similar in so many ways.
Can you tell us a little bit about what was happening in your life when Maya was diagnosed?
Yeah, so we had a three-year-old little girl, and we were pregnant for the second time, and we got to midway through our pregnancy, and Maya sadly got diagnosed with breast cancer after a check, just coming up to our scan. So getting diagnosed with cancer during pregnancy is a really a very unusual scenario that not an awful lot of people have heard of before, let alone actually experienced. So we had all the the fears and unknowns about what that meant around pregnancy, but fortunately for us, we were able to continue with the pregnancy. We had a great team around us. Maya was responding to her treatment really well, and then about 8 weeks postpartum, she went downhill very quickly in one of her chemo cycles and didn't really come out the other side the way she normally would. And after a couple of investigations, it was revealed that she had a really aggressive meningeal spread to the meningeal lining of her brain, and she went downhill within a couple of weeks and died when our little boy was 10 weeks old. Similar in a way that because it changed so quickly, because we were in a curative situation, and then overnight it became terminal, and we had 3 weeks. We didn't do the preparatory thing. There are conversations that I would have loved to have had, and some of that's been guesswork over the years. But my reflections on that and the speed of her decline, at the time, and I think they've remained true to this over the last 12 years, were that while it took away the opportunity that, say, Jakub has been talking about, of being able to have those preparatory conversations, the comfort I've taken out of that is that she declined so quickly. Mm-hmm. I like to think that there was a small mercy in that, and that she didn't have an elongated suffering. But that obviously is at the cost of having been able to have that, that extra time with her. I think as time goes on, you reflect back, and you draw out the positives. I think prior to Maya's advancement of her disease, I think we were already in a routine of, we had a little girl to get up and get ready and get to nursery each day, and we had a little baby that needed looking after and everything. So it was very much, family life just needs to function, and you get into the swing of things and you get into your routine. And strangely, when Maya died, the following day was really no different. I got up, I made sure Merlin was okay, and he had his feed in the morning, and I wrapped him up, and I took his sister off to nursery, and it was almost, to the outside looking in, it would have appeared as if nothing was any different, even though their mum had died the previous evening. Your routine had been set around her being unwell, and it didn't really shift in her absence, if you like, because she'd not been able to participate for several months in the way that she'd wanted to. So, yeah, it was kind of a strange, she's here, she's gone, but I've got to get on with things, because, two little children aren't going to be able to really do much for themselves without me being able to function. So I think probably the biggest adrenaline hit and anybody, I think, ever experiences is sadly in a situation like this, to be able to actually, to power you through.
I mean, I can absolutely hear that drive, and also that reflection of it. How does this look on the outside? We don't necessarily always know what this grief looks like, and actually situating it, like, what should it look like? But you knew what you had to do, and so, like, that is what it is on that day. But it's interesting that we sometimes think that it should look like something, and kind of, where do we get that idea of what it should be from? Like, is it from movies? Is it from TV shows? Where do you think that you got that kind of idea of what it should look like?
there's a societal perception, I think, there's, what grief will look like around family life, and you've got the copers, that kind of fight or flight response to grief. And I think we all, deal with it very, very differently. Even if it looks similar to the outside, we can be dealing with it very differently internally. I think because I was in the situation, I felt like, well, I haven't really got any choice. I haven't got, I wasn't in a position where I could just go, do you know what, I can't do this today because I just can't cope, because it's really too hard, because I still had this squirming little, boy next to me who he couldn't do anything for himself. So I think I ended up getting kicked into an autopilot for quite a long time, really, in terms of being able to go, do you know what, I really can't take my foot off the gas here now until he's at least one. And even then, it won't be taking my foot off completely. He'll just be a little bit more mobile. And anybody who's had children will know, you think it gets easier when they walk, and then actually it becomes more tricky, because then you're kind of trying to chase around the place all the time. I think there was more of a relaxation of it'll be less of the baby times, and it'll be more of the get out, do the fun stuff. And I think what was really interesting was you get an insight in part on the days when you're feeling good that, God, you know what? It really is true, everything they say. Maternity leave is no cakewalk for people. It really is difficult. With grief, without grief, it's just, it's tough. It's sleep deprived, it's joyful, it's stressful, it's full of anxieties and worries, it's full of celebratory moments. And then you mix grief into that, and there naturally is that feeling of, but I shouldn't be here celebrating all these the first rose, the first smile, the first, all those different things that you don't typically hear wrapped into a conversation about cancer, in terms of, around what happens when somebody's, when children are so young. But I think that maybe a little bit of militancy in me, I think, felt a little bit, do you know what, there's also this presumption that men do not cope in grief, because, whether we like to admit it or not, I think historically society has dictated that women are the copers in stressful situations. They'll be the ones that add the structure, and they may have traditionally been the ones that were looking after the children in a kind of a stereotypical kind of gentrified way. And this was a situation where how would a man cope with his grief, because he's not normally the person that's looking after the kids and this, that, and the other. And I experienced this from the outside in, when I felt people occasionally saying, "Oh, you're doing so well. It's brilliant the way you're bringing these children up on your own. You're doing a fantastic job." And my instinct, because I knew quite a few other people in different situations, both females grieving, but also other people in, where family situations had broken down. And I always thought, it's lovely to hear that, but do you equally congratulate women in my situation? Are they doing brilliantly managing and bringing the children up well? Do you congratulate the divorcee around the corner who's, been on her own for years? Are we not all just single parents, that when we strip our reasons away? And I think that's what I kind of brought it back down to, was I am a single parent. I'm not going to let my grief define me, and I'm actually doing the doing, and I'm loving being a dad, and I've always been an active dad. So why does that change? Because grief has come into that same space and time. And I think sometimes that's what we can all lose sight of a little bit at times. I think when grief hits us like this, and in such a cruel way for any of us, that I think it's like, no, do you know what? We're all really capable people. We have maybe sometimes a little bit more to contend with.
You really channeled that experience into helping other people that also experience cancer during pregnancy and, shortly after the birth of their child. Can you tell us a little bit about Mummy Star?
I suppose the link to this really is what I think Jakub was talking earlier on about the 5 stages of grief. And I think I for a long time, I never thought I felt or experienced an anger phase as part of that. And I was always wondering, like, at what point is it going to hit? Where does this creep up? Because we know that cycle and those stages happen, for everybody in different stages. I think for me, the unusualness of our diagnosis around pregnancy had set a ball rolling, I think, long before, Maya ever knew that she wasn't going to survive, around, like, how do families cope in this situation? Where is the additional support for how do you juggle chemotherapy and a newborn baby? And, reflecting on the fact that we were very fortunate in our situation, that we had, both of us were together, we had a very stable family unit, we had family and community around us to support us. And I think there was a reflection on, but what if you don't have that? What if you've just moved? What if you don't have your community structure? What if you're a single parent? How would you cope in that situation? So myself and a couple of other women that I've been put in touch with through our hospital had got together then in the wake of Maya's death, and had a conversation about this and said, look, what we need to change the situation. There's nothing, tailor-made for families in our kind of scenario. So we need to set about changing that. And that's where the idea from Mummy Star it came from, to be able to provide that emotional connection for people, in a similar situation, irrespective of specific types of cancer, but just being diagnosed with cancer, either any stage during pregnancy or during pregnancy loss, or, up to a child turning 1, to be able to have that connection, but also the one-to-one emotional support and financial support for families, and a lot of advocacy and education and awareness around, cancer symptoms being hidden in and around pregnancy and postnatally, and how people have, how symptoms are ignored, and then it obviously delays treatment, etc. as well. But I think on reflection, I think all the energy that I ploughed into, this is going to be a legacy and this is going to be something that goes on for years. That probably, in hindsight, was my anger getting ploughed into, making that happen. Because I certainly didn't have a conscious energy to do it. So it was obviously, it stemmed from somewhere. We're 11 years, down the line now. I think I first got connected with Shine because of, one of your founder, Kindman's, personal experiences around the birth of her daughter as well. And that's what kind of brought us together in that space. And yeah, it's what I now do full time. And you could call that a blessing or a curse. Sometimes it keeps cancer far too much in the mind's eye than I'd like to. And there's a lot of emotional load that gets carried with that. Other times I think I could hide away from cancer. And then as soon as I hear a close relative or a friend get diagnosed, everything would have come back and hit me like a ton of bricks. And my approach was the one that it was. I don't encourage anybody else to go and do the same thing. But that said, we all have our own, personal reflections back on, on what cancer does and how it dictates how our family lives unfold. And yeah, I'm glad we did do what we've managed to do over the years. And I'm glad we've been able to, support as many people as we have.
Yeah, it's incredible work that you're doing, and so important, because again, like, that is not a time that you think you're gonna, be facing cancer when you're having a child. Like, you think that it's not going to happen till decades later. So yeah, really, really important. And what you said about kind of emotions coming out in different ways and kind of, maybe not even noticing them until much later. I wanted to bring Jakub in here because I know that you had a bit of an epiphany as you were sort of walking around your house as to like what was going on with you inside, being reflected on what you were seeing.
This was actually, kind of towards the end of that busy period that I was talking about. And I was, I'd go out into the backyard and I there was just something gnawing at me. And it hit me that the paving stones were broken, and that some of the grouting in between them had come out and like weeds had started sprouting. And I thought more about it, and just looking around the house, and some door handles had come off and I hadn't had time to fix them, and there was like a few cracks in the walls and all of that kind of thing. And it struck me that because the 3 previous years had been so hectic, there'd been a certain amount of neglect, and not just neglect my house, but also like myself personally. And one of the things that is really, really common is you'll also hear that people get really sick at the end of the busy period, where they finally get a chance to wind down a little bit. But so that very much happened to me. I was sick for about 6 weeks, as it turns out, because of my blood iron levels were 0 because I'd run myself into the ground so much. The thing that really bothered me with the house falling apart was like, wow, this is really like an external manifestation of my internal self. And days before we were supposed to head off on this like massive road trip across Europe to go to Poland, I was like regrouting the backyard and like fixing tiles and doing whatever. I was like, right, if that is in good shape, then at least like that thing is out of my head, and if I can kind of get my surrounding environment into kind of a stable place, then I can actually start toning down my sort of I guess, my own stress levels and start, working on myself as well, right? And working on processing the neglect that I have had, both of myself emotionally, but also of myself physically, which has taken quite a long time. And I've been working on it like really hard over the last few months.
And I think that is something that isn't necessarily always taken into consideration. I don't think partners get asked enough, like, how's it going and what do you need? But actually, yes, you're doing the job. And just like Pete, you were saying, like, from the time treatment starts, you're picking up all the extra things and you're providing the extra emotional, physical support sometimes for your person. And yes, you really want to do that, like Andrew was saying, in terms of, that can feel like a honor that you're happy to do that. But actually it comes at sometimes a cost of yourself and that time and space to know where your head is at and kind of what it is that you need. After that, then you go into grief. So it's not like you're going from a level playing field into it. You're going in from this really depleted place, which is maybe quite different than if it happens really, really quickly, like you were saying with an accident. And I
think adrenaline is a really underrated impact. I think when you reflect back, I don't know about you guys, I think when you reflect back on, God, how did I get through that 4 weeks? And often you've no idea because it's such a blur, but it's just that thing that just carries you. And it just, I think that example that Jakub's just given is so true. It's just all of a sudden, it just runs out.
Yeah.
And you feel that slump and that sickness and that lethargy that comes in. And it's like, is this grief or is it just me just finally letting myself go? You've done an awful lot for a few weeks. You need to actually chill out and just give yourself a little bit of recovery time. But it carries you more than I think anybody can ever preempt, that conversation, say, don't worry, you'll cope. You won't know how you do, but you'll cope. And when anybody ever says that, I always think, yeah, that's because nobody can fully explain what adrenaline will do to you in that situation, and it will kick in.
If you were to be able to whisper back in time a little snippet of advice to yourself, what would you send back? It could be to any time period. So, Andrew.
I think it would be, don't live in denial. Okay. Quite simply, yeah. I think learning from how I've dealt with things. I think the adrenaline things are main, that got me through the first few weeks. But I think, yeah, learning to sort of not live with a denial would have helped me a great deal. Because I know that Kelly wanted to plan stuff and I shut that down effectively. She had a funeral planned and things like that. Bizarrely, within a week of being diagnosed, and I didn't want to do that because in my head, not going to happen. But the reality was, from the get-go, it was going to happen. And I think that would be the advice to myself: don't live in denial.
Oh, and yet so understandable. To imagine your person not there anymore is sometimes completely incomprehensible. Yeah. And almost feels a little like, for some people, I've heard it said like a bit of a betrayal, like to even mentally step into a future without them, even though you know in your conscious that that's going to happen. Thank you for that, Andrew. And Pete.
I think reflect back and just take as many pictures as you possibly can and not posed ones. Just catch the moments that are really natural in those, in those months and weeks and days. Don't expect somebody to look all happy for the picture, but catch those moments where they're just staring out the window, or they've got that child resting on them, or they're sitting having a cup of tea at the table. Just those really natural moments, because that, to me, in hindsight, they're the moments that were them. Not necessarily we can all pose for a picture. It can hide a number of ills, whereas the natural moments are exactly what they are. I think, I wish I'd taken more of those, because I search in my mind for more pictures, but I sadly don't have them. And it's something I've learned to do a lot more of, since, because you just never know what's going to happen.
Thanks, Pete. Jakub.
I've kind of got two. So I have 3 kids, 12, 10 and 7. And, I very much switched into, right, I'm the only one looking after them. I've got to look after them. I've got to look after their needs first. And very quickly it turned out that was the wrong thing to be doing. I needed to look after myself first because without me, everything falls apart. So I was sick for an extended period of time as a symptom of neglect, physical neglect, low blood iron. And someone asked me, how did you not get a sense like blood iron? You must have been absolutely knackered. And it's like, well, adrenaline, caffeine, and like sheer pigheadedness got me through. Definitely look after yourself first. That's the first thing. And then the second one, and this is very much a sort of the piece of advice to myself a few months back: emotional regulation. That's a really big deal. I had not just my emotions to deal with, but also that of 3 children who were all processing it very, very differently. And all of their emotions were coming onto me, and it overflowed. And, part of that is taking care of yourself, but it's also, just being aware of your emotions, stepping away from the situation, saying, no, I can't deal with this right now. Let me take a breath. I'll come back to you in a few minutes. Emotions have been very, very high, over the last few months, both, with my kids and myself. So yeah, look after yourself and really work on emotional regulation. There's plenty of videos out there on YouTube about how to do it, and, tips and techniques and that sort of stuff.
It's a really powerful point because, you can be surrounded by other people that are also grieving, but everyone is doing it differently. And actually everyone's processing is going to affect everybody else. And one thing that I was told, which made me, it seemed kind of depressing at the time, but actually helped in reflection, was that all grief is lonely. And when I really took that on board, it stopped me sort of looking for someone else to have the same experience as me, and that it will be absolutely unique. But it's also really tough when you watch someone that you love grieving and that there is a lonely aspect, and you don't want them to have that lonely aspect. So having both of those things at the same time, but getting to talk to other people about it. How has it been chatting to each other today?
Really good. I think it's really interesting hearing things that you think about yourself quite a lot coming, in other people's voices and articulated in different ways. Because before, I think that latter point, especially I think that Jakub's just made, I think I was thinking earlier on about what you were just saying now about, other people's grief, and where it's okay it's important to acknowledge somebody else's grief that's connected to your grief, but it's not your responsibility to help their grief, and their coping mechanisms need to be done by themselves. You've got you, and in our situations, we've got us, and we've got our children, and that is our nucleus that we've got to look after. We have not got the energy to take on other people and trying to support them through their grief, because we support it differently. Mothers, brothers, sisters, uncles, aunts, we all experience it differently. But it's I think it's always really validating for me to hear what I have felt from other people, male or female, and sharing that, there's an awful lot of similarity in what we experience, even though our timelines and our circumstances individually and our children's ages are all very, very different. But there is that, that shared power and support, that comes from peer support, that I just think is so, so underestimated as one of the tools of recovery that we have.
Absolutely. And that's why we wanted to do this podcast, because, if there's people listening that haven't been around other people their own age, kind of hearing some of these reflections and normalizing these conversations, and perhaps even having a hard time, like, why did I do this? And actually it was really normal, and other people do that too. And this doesn't get talked about enough, and it really needs to. Any other last thoughts before we say goodbye?
Don't feel guilty if you find yourself laughing at something, even if it's a week after you've lost your loved one, or if it's 6 months or a year. Do you know what? We're entitled to laugh, and we're entitled to find things funny, and give yourself permission. I think that was something else that was said before. Give yourself permission so that you can actually enjoy life, just because something awful and tragic happens.
No, I couldn't agree more with that, Pete. Definitely. I go through periods of feeling grief about various things that I've done over the last, guilt. I think that's the word, about various things that I've done over the last 12 months. But then certain things have made me happy, and my boys seeing me happy has made them happier, if that makes any sense, because they lost me for a long while.
Stop feeling guilty about things. Guilt is the least productive of all emotions, because they're by definition, you're feeling guilty about something you did or you didn't do, and it's in the past, and there's no way to rectify it. The other thing is, all grief experiences are going to be very different from each other. Don't feel that it's like, oh, actually, do you know what? I should be feeling like this, or you shouldn't. No, just accept it. Feel the feeling that you're feeling at that particular time, and just accept it for what it is. And if your thought process is taking you to some place that you didn't expect, then write it out, because that's clearly something that you need to do. But also feel free to step away from that. There's absolutely nothing that says that you have to be grieving for an extended period of time, and you have to give yourself that period of recovery.
I love that. It's when you catch those shoulds creeping in. As a friend of mine used to say, stop shoulding on yourself. When you start to, but, grief looks a certain way, sounds a certain way, or, you have to wait a certain amount of time before going out on a date, or whatever it is. There are no shoulds, there are no rule books, and it is living in that contradiction of, your loss is uniquely yours, and it can be a bit lonely in there, but actually there is a community of people that will understand elements of it, and we're all unique at the same time. Thank you so much to all of you for being on the podcast today. And you've heard us talk about the Shine Plus Ones program, and that is our 6-week program for people whose partner has an incurable diagnosis. So if that's something that you think that you might like to join, come find us at shinecancersupport.org. Till next time. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
This is not your grandma's cancer show. Not your grandma's cancer show.